Welcome back to Goju Tech Talk. I want to just quickly share my song of the day, Atmosphere by Anima and Chris Avantgarde. Wow, okay. And this is a good one. This is so good. We got to drop this in the chat. Now, we are going to check some stuff out. And it all started from our poll. So here's our poll. Let's refresh to see if this is live. All right, this is the poll I did just a little bit ago, and we've got around 100 votes. Here's what I see. People with some good distribution, actually. I was sort of expecting, I'm not sure exactly what I was expecting, but it's clear people want more AI. So we're going to, at least based on this. Now, 100 votes is not that many. It's only been cooking for less than an hour. So I'll continue to monitor this, and then I'll run more surveys, especially once we find maybe like one area is really taken off. Then I'll break it down and ask more specific questions like about that area, such as, okay, do we want to learn about unsupervised, self-supervised learning? Do we want to do reinforcement learning? Do we want to learn more about deterministic AI, stochastic AI, stochastic and deterministic AI? Like I'll just break it down. We'll go deeper and deeper. And so, needless to say, more AI is the winner by 2x over these other ones. Even Merly the dog. Oh boy. Guys, all right. This was supposed to be the clear winner. All right. So those of you who voted for this, okay, good job. But admittedly, if I was taking this, I'd probably vote for this too. So, all right. So we're going to talk more AI. And we're going to specifically talk about some stuff that is happening at Amazon. But before we do that, we're going to do an interesting walk down memory lane yesterday and play back what we discussed in the stream as a way to set up the story for what we're going to look at. All right. So this is me just 11 hours ago. And let's hear what this guy has to say. I mean, the ramifications of big tech making a mistake, if they do something that is egregious, they could be sued for billions of dollars because they have that much money. Whereas if a small startup like Scale or Character AI, if they do something wrong, they don't even have that much money to sue for litigation. And so the big targets principally stay these near $1 trillion companies. Or on this list, I mean, Alphabet's $1 trillion, Microsoft is $1 trillion, Amazon I think is $1 trillion, and I'm not sure about Meta. But yeah, the landscape I think is heavily tilted toward big tech.
Now, this helps explain also, guys, why Meta and Zuckerberg are spending billions of dollars to build their own models and deploy sovereign scale infrastructure. It all comes together with stories like these ones.
Yeah, I don't know about. Yeah. It's strange that they keep throwing Meta into this discussion. Here we go. It's not that Meta isn't competing in the general landscape of AI, but what we're talking about right now is sort of the AI coding hype wars. And some of the major players in the AI coding hype wars. Okay, so this is the part to set the stage for what we're going to discuss. Talking about the major players in the AI coding hype wars. All right, let's see what this guy has to say. It's our Alphabet and Amazon, Microsoft, IBM. Yeah, and there's probably a couple others. So it's surprising to not see IBM here because Alphabet has a variety of things from Google. Amazon, at least historically, had things like Code Whisperer and other systems. They actually have some really interesting learned systems, so machine learning systems that do a variety of things like code analysis, stuff related to their AWS infrastructure, which I think they're not driving this as much as it appears that folks like Anthropic, Google, and Microsoft are, and potentially OpenAI, but they're definitely doing stuff. I think they're just maybe keeping things on the DL. Okay, that was this whole rant about Amazon, and I wanted you to hear this first before we watch this next piece. And basically, the short of it is, I'm basically describing where Amazon is sort of in this space and the things that I'm aware of that Amazon has done historically in the AI coding space. And keep in mind, Amazon has been involved in this space long before Transformers. They're doing a whole bunch of stuff. In fact, I think that they did some stuff that was similar to our AutoPerf stuff, which is it was like one of our NeurIPS. I think so. Yeah, this zero positive. So we did this research paper on AutoPerf, which can automatically identify performance regressions, and it uses a fusion of like three things. Yes, zero positive learning, which I can explain, but we'll explain it later. Autoencoders, which, as some of you probably know, is a specific type of neural network that does an encoding and decoding phase, and it helps you learn things like the identity function, which can be very useful. I can discuss that in more detail later, but let's put a pin in that. So, zero positive learning, autoencoders, variational autoencoders, and then the third is hardware telemetric data, essentially hardware telemetry that comes in through hardware performance counters. Hardware performance counters are counters that are keeping track of various executions of programs, and they're running under the hood on almost all modern CPU. Maybe I want to say GPU, but let's just say modern CPUs for things like desktop, laptop, servers, and then possibly edge devices like mobile. Okay. Those are the three things that sort of make this, hi, Wendy, that make this possible, this paper. So how is this relevant? While we were publishing this paper, there was some Amazon work. Guru? Okay, hold on. Like this. Oh, here we go. Yeah, this thing. This DevOps Guru thingamabob with Amazon. Okay, so analyzing performance anomalies with Amazon DevOps Guru. All right, and then look at this: zero positive learning approach diagnosing software performance regressions. And check this out. I thought we were going to mention. We kind of talk about anomaly detection in the abstract, but without saying anomaly detection. So false negatives, kind of anomaly detection, and then identifying performance regressions. This is also anomaly detection. But then in here somewhere, I want to say we talk about... Oh, yeah, and we get into the probe effect. Those of you that don't know what the probe effect is, it's It's often referred to as like Heisenbugs. Heisenbugs are bugs that exist, but then when you go to investigate them, diagnose them, identify them, they vanish. Heisenbug. So, for those of you who think I am just making stuff up, I'm not. I don't think you guys think I'm making stuff up, but it sounds like a made up thing. But no, it's a real thing. A Heisenbug is a software bug that is difficult to reproduce or debug because it changes or disappears when one attempts to observe it or use it in standard debugging technique. What's an example of a Heisenbug? A performance regression that occurs in parallel software. That's a great example of a Heisenbug. Why is that Heisenbug as opposed to just a performance regression in a serial program? When you go to debug a parallel program that has a performance anomaly, if it's related to multiple threads of execution, the very art of trying to diagnose this and detect it through various performance analysis techniques will often change the contention signature of the program, essentially the performance signature, and that will essentially result in that performance issue in many cases vanishing, right? So Heisenbug, and that's a lot of what we were focusing on over here. We principally focusing on, because I think we mentioned probe effect. A probe effect is a similar way to talk about things like Heisenbugs. I thought I saw something about probe effect. Here we go. Furthermore, analyzing multi-threaded programs running over highly parallel hardware is much harder due to the probe effect, often incurred by traditional software profilers and debuggers. Therefore, a more general, lightweight, and reliable approach is needed. That's why we had to use hardware performance counters. Hardware performance counters induce essentially negligible or non-existent performance overhead. Therefore, the probe effect of using these types of hardware performance counters is, yes, it's essentially negligible, which is great. Okay, cool. So we're veering off the path a little bit. I'm going to reel us back in. The point of all this is in doing research in this space, right? This is like 2018 or some nonsense. It was a while back. Okay, 2019. So that's 6 years ago. And we started working on this paper, I think, in 2017. So this is like 8 years ago. When this was coming out, I was looking at other things, and Amazon was doing this. And this is very interesting because it relates to the stuff that we were doing with NeurOps. And by the way, this paper got so much attention. I actually flew to Microsoft headquarters, or Microsoft flew me to Microsoft headquarters to talk about this and how we might integrate this into their systems. Because this was very, very interesting to them. They knew that they had these performance regressions. They knew that they suffered the probe effect, and they would like to identify these things and then correct them. And coincidentally, some of my Microsoft collaborators were at NeurOps. They actually tracked me down, and then that's how a lot of this came to be. So I'm familiar with what Microsoft's doing, what Amazon's doing, all this. So this is how I knew, to some degree, that when I was talking about this, saying Amazon's been up to some stuff. So let's just quickly listen to this one more time, or at least just the last part of it. A variety of things from... It's strange that they keep throwing some of the major players in the AI coding hype wars are Alphabet, Amazon, Microsoft, IBM. Yeah, and there's probably a couple others. So it's surprising to not see IBM here because Alphabet has a variety of things from Google. Amazon, at least historically, had things like Code Whisperer and other systems. They actually have some really interesting learned systems. So let's just take a quick look at that as well. I think it was Amazon code. Yeah, this thing. Cool. Is this? Oh, no, go away. Okay, there's clearly some stuff going on over here. I haven't been to their website in a while, and clearly they've done some stuff. They've made some updates and things. But it used to be Code Whisperer. Yeah, Amazon Code Whisperer is an AI-powered coding companion. All right, so this is the background, that Amazon's been doing this kind of stuff for a while. And so even if you don't hear Amazon's name in the discussions that are happening today, the point that I was trying to make here is that don't count Amazon out. Just because they're being quiet doesn't mean that they're not up to something. So now let's see what they're up to. All right. And I want to be clear, I have not seen this video. I think I just started looking at it. I watched the first 30 seconds, but I have no idea what he's going to get into. Although I will, I want to be clear, I absolutely love these guys. I watch them constantly. So if you are not familiar with Fireship, strongly recommend you subscribe. They'll put out these little blips of things, and they tend to be like absolutely on point, 100% on point. Okay, yeah, right. So this came out 16 hours ago. All right, the timetable matters at least to some degree here. That this video I did this 11 hours ago, and so I hadn't seen this until after this that video. So now let's watch this.
Yesterday, out of nowhere, Amazon released its own AI IDE named Kiro, yet another VS Code fork that will compete for the hearts and minds of programmers alongside editors like Cursor, Windsurf, Firebase Studio, and Copilot, just to name a few. It's powered by Claude Sonnet 4.0, but claims to be better at handling complexity than these other sloppy tools thanks to an approach called spec-driven development. And right now it's free to use, but that's not the only good news.
The other thing I want to share with these guys, which is so great, is they tend to be a little snarky, but they tend to also be very truthful. They're gonna tell it to you straight. And so he just said some stuff that really made me laugh. I just want to roll back. Let's hear what he says one more time.
Than these other sloppy tools. 0.0, but claims to be better at handling complexity than these other sloppy tools.
Ouch. Cool.
Thanks to an approach called spec-driven development. And right now it's free to use, but that's not the only good news for developers. The Chinese just dropped Kimi K2, an open-weight agentic coding model that approaches the performance of Claude. These tools are so powerful, they might even be able to fix pirate software's code, so the entire internet can finally stop dunking on this guy. In today's video, we'll try out Amazon Kiro to find out if it truly is the Cursor Copilot killer. It is July.
Guys, I'm dying here. Okay, hold on. I'm going to do a poll to see how many people are seeing what's going on with pirate software. But just for the chat, if you are aware with what's going on with pirate software, and I know some of you are probably lurking there, just drop like a 1. You can just put the number 1 in there. And if you're not aware with what's going on with pirate software, you can drop a 2 in there. Don't be afraid to chime in. You're not going to get bitten or anything. But while we're waiting for people to speak up there, I want to share that I have been following sort of what's going on with pirate software. And I have a hard rule where I'm not about dunking on people or making people feel like they're being attacked. And so I'm not going to do that. I just want to be clear. I will not do that with pirate software. Even if he potentially kind of people might be a little bit justified in dunking on him based on some of the stuff that he's done, especially maybe with Stop Killing Games. But I want to share that I have been following a little bit on the pirate software thing, and I got to tell you, one of the greatest things you can do to lose trust with people, to lose respect from people, to generally just burn bridges with people, is never apologize when you make mistakes. This is a surefire way to burn all bridges with all kinds of people, is that when you make a mistake, never apologize and basically tell everybody else that they're wrong. Now, I follow the opposite type of mentality. I apologize as fast as I can as soon as I realize I've made a mistake. It seems like I'm apologizing to an untranslatable metaphor every time he gets onto the comment section, because he leaves comments that point out my mistakes, which, by the way, metaphor, I absolutely love. 100%. You're making me a better person, so please don't stop doing that. I absolutely love the feedback. Thank you, thank you, thank you. However, if I took the stance that Pirate Software took, which is telling everybody that disagrees with them they're idiots, and he's always right, I suspect that minimally untranslatable metaphor would be not paying attention. So the moral of the story, at least from Goju's stoic type of view, when you make a mistake, just apologize. It's pretty simple. People tend to be very forgiving if you authentically own when you make mistakes, because we're all human. We all make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time, and that's sort of the cost of trying to do stuff. And so you shouldn't feel bad about mistakes. I mean, like, let's not go Epstein level mistakes. I'm talking about like you accidentally say the wrong thing. I'm not talking about you intentionally are doing really bad things. But those types of mistakes, like there's a spelling mistake, or I forgot to talk about resource acquisition is initialization. Thank you, metaphor. RAII is our friend. My bad. Those types of mistakes, totally forgivable, as long as you just own up to them. You just step up and say, oh, my bad. I'm sorry. That's it. Almost all of the drama related to Pirate Software, if he just would have said, you know what? I kind of messed up. I'm sorry. Thank you guys. This would all just probably instantly vanish. But because I don't know if he knows those two words, I'm sorry, this happens. And what's unfortunate is it's not just this incident. There are many. And so, yeah, poor guy. I really hope that I'm not dunking on him. Like, I can understand that it can be pretty embarrassing to make mistakes, and especially if you're trying to sound like a wise sage, you want to, I think, sort of a simplistic view of that is you probably want to feel like you don't say the wrong thing. But the truth is I think the wise sages out there, they know they still say the wrong thing all the time, that they hope that they'll say less wrong things. But part of what makes them wise sages is they know that they make mistakes, and so does everybody else. So there's no expectation of perfection. There's just expectation of effort and trying to be better tomorrow. That's it. That's basically it in a nutshell, at least as far as I'm concerned. And so you shouldn't strive for perfection in the things that you say. You should just strive to be as good as you can. At least that's my take. All right, let's get back to this.
the entire internet can finally stop dunking on this guy. In today's video, we'll try out Amazon Kiro to find out if it truly is the Cursor Copilot killer. It is July 16th, 2025, and you're watching the Code Report. You might remember a few weeks ago when OpenAI was going to buy that other VS Code fork, Windsurf, for billions of dollars. Well, that deal fell apart. Then Google came in and gutted all the talent from the company by convincing them to abandon ship and join Google for $2.4 billion. That screwed over many of the employees at Windsurf, but it's not a total loss because then Cognition, the creator of Devon, swooped in after Google to buy up all the scraps in what appears to be an all-stock deal. We live in a world where people will literally pay you billions of dollars for a VS Code.
Ooh, I didn't know that detail. I didn't know oh boy. Ooh. Oh, I wouldn't have taken that deal. An all-stock deal from... Okay, I'm going to shut up now. But for those of you who know what's up, I suspect I don't need to say anymore. For those of you that don't know, just pretend like I didn't say anything. Okay, this is live stream, so hey. It said I may edit it out, but at least for those of you on this stream, you're going to get a gem that may or may not actually have happened in future incarnations of this historical event. And again, if that doesn't make sense to you, no worries. Like, it's all good.
Code fork because all these companies are desperate to get developers to use their products. But the company taking the lion's share of developer money is Anthropic, primarily thanks to its Claude Code CLI tool. Anthropic went from less than $1 billion in revenue last year to now over $4 billion this year. And one of their biggest investors is Amazon, which has pumped $8 billion into the company so far. Now, if you don't use Claude Code.
And what's cool is all the things that he's talking about are things that a lot of this we discussed yesterday, because we were talking about the complexity of this story, right? And how one of the big factors that makes this challenging, especially for Team 3, or the way that Windsurf is going to have good things or bad things going on, is based on their relationship with Anthropic and access to Claude, which basically means key acquisition targets for Windsurf are either Google or Amazon, for the very reason that our YouTube guy, Fireship, just mentioned. Cool. So now you're hearing it maybe from multiple sources. So hopefully this is maybe becoming more clear, like the different perspectives, different ways of telling sort of the same story.
Billion this year, and one of their biggest investors is Amazon, which has pumped $8 billion into the company so far. Now, if you don't use Claude Code, there's a good chance you use an IDE like Cursor powered by Claude instead. It's great, but the problem is that Anthropic has Cursor by the balls.
So what I was saying yesterday is that here you have, and I think I mentioned, I'm not sure if I had Cursor in here, but I think I tried to make the point that a lot of people are using the Claude models for their infrastructure stuff, their vibe coding. So it's not just Windsurf that was doing it, Cursor's doing it. It looks like even Amazon was doing it to some degree on the website visit we just had, because we saw Claude mentioned numerous times. So this is a very important thing to consider, is that many of the folks are relying on the Claude models. And I want to be super clear about something. The way Anthropic is charging right now, I think, is largely out of whack for what the Claude models are costing them for their training, maintenance, and inference, which means inevitably the cost of using these Claude models will go up. It must, because their investors are not going to suffer them being in the red perpetually because they're undercharging for utilization of the Claude models, because they need to be in the black. Now, what does this mean? Well, it means then that anyone that's using the Claude models, especially in their own products like Windsurf and Cursor, and potentially even Amazon stuff, all of their prices also have to go up. Why? Because it's a distribution thing, is that you can charge $10 because these guys are selling you parts for your thing for $1. But the moment that your distribution parts supplier is now going to increase the fee for that part from $1 to $10, you no longer can charge $10 because that would give you zero profit. And you need to have some sort of profit if you're just breaking even. I mean, you could potentially do this just to grow traction, but ultimately you need to be making profit on the things that you're selling. I mean, you can have loss leaders like the Xbox or the PS3 or whatever. Those are loss leaders in the sense that you take losses, but they lead the way towards secondary sales where you make money. So when Sony and Microsoft and others, maybe even the Steam Deck, when they sell those hardware, they tend to sell those at a loss. That's a loss leader, because what it's doing then is enabling sort of an ecosystem or an environment to be used where secondary systems now can function not at a loss, at a gain. They can move you into the black. Basically, you can actually make profit, but without the loss leader, you can't. Right? Like if you don't have the console of the PS3, 4, 5, whatever, or you don't have the Xbox, or you don't have the Steam Deck, or you don't have the tablet, you don't have the Apple Watch, you don't have the iPhone. If you don't have those things, then you can't make purchases for like the games that will run on those console, or run on the Steam Deck, or the apps that will run on the iPhone, or run on the Apple Watch, right? So loss leaders can be very valuable, but they tend to be a single entity with a whole ecosystem around them. In this particular case, Cursor or Windsurf, these are not loss leaders, at least not right now, because these things have to make a profit because there is no secondary product. Now, what's interesting is that Anthropic could potentially itself have the Claude models be loss leaders because they have the ability to add a peripheral ecosystem around it, but they would potentially be the only ones. Right? It's again like why Apple can have the iPhone be a loss leader. Not that it is, but it could be. Wouldn't matter because they get the Apple. They get essentially the Apple Store or whatever it's called, and they get 30% cut on whatever the sale is for every app that's in their store, even if they're not the publisher, they're not the developer of that. But notice that it's only when the company that owns the loss leader can execute in this capacity. So Anthropic could have Claude perhaps be a loss leader for them, but it would only help them and their ecosystem. Very similarly, like how Apple would do the loss leader for the iPhone or the Apple Watch, or Microsoft could do it for the Xbox, Sony could do it the PlayStation, Valve could do it for the Steam Deck, but only for those individual companies. So it could be that the Claude models act as a loss leader for Anthropic, but it's not going to, or at least I can't see how that could be the case for Windsurf and Cursor. So anyway, just more data on the complexity of how this is all working. This is part of the reason why I think that large language models, especially as a catalyst to create like massive amount of change, are a really bad sort of like long-term form of technology to move us forward. So the reason for this is, one, the large language models can generally only be trained and then hosted by a small number of companies that are on the border of like trillion-dollar companies. So Meta, Google, Amazon, OpenAI, Anthropic, IBM, folks like that can do this, train these models because they have the massive cloud and compute resources, they have the disposable cash, all of that kind of stuff. And so then they can get this massive language model that then is massively compute heavy just for inference, but it could be that it pays itself off. Now, the challenge here, the part that is the gotcha for the rest of the world that is not a $1 trillion tech company, is you can't train the large language models So what does this mean? It means that you are beholden to big tech's large language models, which means that whatever big tech wants to charge for inference on the language models, you have no say over. So while things may be looking really good today, guess what? The moment that Claude or Anthropic decides to increase the cost of Claude models for their APIs because their investors are no longer going to let them function in the red, that increase in price is going straight to you. And there's nothing you can do about it. You are perpetually beholden to big tech if you are deeply relying on large language models. That's not a really good space to be in. Instead, one would hope that we could do things more like open source, right? So we can open source something like Linux. So we're not beholden to Microsoft Windows or Apple macOS. And then what happens when we do something like the Linux Foundation is it levels the playing field and it keeps everyone honest. It keeps them fair. So because we have our own thing in the open source, they can't play shenanigans with us. If they start to do a shenanigans thing, we just say, okay, Microsoft, Apple, we're not going to use your operating systems. We're just going to use Linux. And then they're like, no. Oh, we'll fix it. We'll fix the pricing. Oh, we love open source, right? Remember the days where Microsoft used to be that open source is the death of everything? And now Microsoft is like, hey, look, we open sourced Visual Code, right? Which I think is wildly amusing given that this is a part of the vehicle that people are using to create these these trying to find the right words here. These vibe coding systems that are somewhat hypey. How about that? That's more fostering goodwill, I think. So it's kind of curious that this is happening with VS Code and it's being triggered from something that Microsoft open sourced. And Microsoft is like historically ardently against open source. And this could actually send them back in that direction, I think. Supposedly they're getting really angry that people keep forking Visual Code. The truth is, for me personally, I just feel bad for the world at this point, because if you've looked at the Visual Code like I have, it's not great, guys. It's not great, guys. So I don't know why you would. It's just like a race to the sloppiest, ugliest, most horrible thing we can do, right? Like, why would you build an entire futuristic system off of a software system that's this fragile? This doesn't seem like a smart thing to do. At least for me personally. So anyway, very interesting stuff going on. Let's go back to this. But I think he's absolutely right that it's not just us that are beholden to the language models. Cursor, this is Cursor. Cursor is fully handcuffed and tied to Anthropic, especially if they continue to just think that the Claude models are it, because now Anthropic can charge whatever they want, and that just flows downstream. Cursor has zero say in that. So essentially, how well Cursor does is at least marginally predicated by how well and how nice Anthropic wants to be. That's my short take on this. Okay, back to the video.
words. If developers want to use Claude, Cursor needs to act as a middleman and price it in a way that can eventually become profitable. Recently, Cursor tried to make some tweaks to its pricing that caught some customers off guard because suddenly their vibe coding bill became way higher, and Cursor had to later come out and apologize publicly. If that weren't bad enough, now here comes Kiro. It's also a VS Code fork with many similar features, and based on its initial pricing, it looks like you'll be able to get much more out of Claude for a much lower price. I'm sure it's a total coincidence that Amazon chose to release Kiro right now, but let's try it out and find out if it's any good. Overall, I think the UI looks really nice, but it did feel a bit slow and was missing small features like chat checkpoints in Cursor. I also ran into a bunch of delays because the service was overloaded, but these are issues you would expect on an early release product like this. The biggest difference, though, is that Kiro tries to prevent you from generating a bunch of slop all at once. Rather than go straight to code, it encourages you to start in this requirements MD file, which defines things like the user story and acceptance conditions.
This is, I find this fascinating. There's one side of this that I think I quite like. And I quite like it because it feels as though it feels to me like what Amazon is doing here is it's very ethical, and it's like a reasonable way to use stochastic AI systems that are reasonably good at understanding natural language to interface them from a specification layer. And in fact, this is one of the key things that we've been arguing with the three pillars of machine programming, right?